Earlier this summer, we took a 5-week road trip through the south of France, from the sun-soaked beaches of Biarritz to the refined beauty of Bordeaux, to the jaw-dropping wonder of Baynac-et-Casnac, to the most beautiful villages in Provence. This was the road trip of a lifetime, and one that we almost didn't take. In this video, we are sharing the 7 myths that almost kept us from taking the most incredible road trip we've ever done. If you've ever dreamed of hopping in a car and just exploring the south of France, we hope that this video inspires you to book the trip. Now, myth number 1 is that Provence and the French Riviera are the only parts of the south of France worth seeing. And we can say this is absolutely not true. The south of France is filled with amazing things that we had never even heard of that turned out to be some of the highlights of our entire trip. And the best part is, in a world where people are constantly talking about over-tourism and crowds and how expensive things are, these are places that were less crowded, more affordable, and still absolutely stunning.
Well, that's right. I mean, we saw some incredible things in the south of France that were before we ever got to Provence. So the Bordeaux area, Saint-Emilion, the wineries there, really a very cool place. But the area that blew our minds was the Dordogne, which just the hilltop villages, the vertical villages, that was just incredible.
I feel like I'm a newscaster. Tell me what you saw. The next myth is that French people are rude. Now, the French do have a bit of a stereotype, but I have to say, in the 5 weeks that we were in France, we had nothing but positive experiences. Everyone that we met was so nice, and that was true in the tourist areas, but even outside the tourist areas, people were even nicer and even more helpful. A shout out to this lovely French woman who offered to take this photo of us in the lavender fields. And also, we got lost one day and ended up in some poor Frenchman's front yard, and he didn't know what was going on, but he was so nice and so helpful and made sure that we got where we were going. So I think that this is an absolute myth. We've been in France before, and we understand the stereotype. We've had a couple of instances, but really not many. And on this trip, it was nothing but very positive. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, look, I think there are fewer people who speak English as a percentage, at least certainly if you go to the more rural areas of southwest France or southern France. I think maybe that communicates some sense of rudeness sometimes, but I don't think that was in any way intended. I think that the people that we met were really, really very generous and gracious.
Now, the next myth is that France is expensive, certainly more expensive than Portugal, which is where we call home. And I have to say, this one was probably surprised both of us quite a bit. We found France to be, yes, more expensive than general cost of living in Portugal, but not by as much as we thought. Things like groceries and going out was overall about 10 to 15% more expensive, which is still far below many areas of the U.S. So we were pleasantly surprised by that. I do think that we see real estate a little bit differently. I love looking at real estate listings. I think that there's some really great value for real estate in many parts of France. We talked about that in our last video, but you saw this a little bit differently, right?
Well, I mean, in terms of the everyday living expenses, certainly they were much less expensive in France than we were expecting it to be. We thought it was going to be very high. Now, look, we were in southern France, and so maybe that's different than if we were in northern France or certainly in Paris. That would probably be very different. But going out was again, it was 60 euros for us to go out to dinner, which is a little bit higher than the normal of 50 euros here in Portugal, but a lot lower than what you would expect to see in the Northeast, which is where we're from, like New York City, be very different in those places to go out. In terms of real estate, it was, I do think that there's some great values in France as well. Look, I do think there are also some great values in Portugal. Now, they may not be in Lisbon anymore, or perhaps even in the Algarve or Porto, but there are some really great values in Portugal. But there are no doubt great values in the southern part of France as well.
Yeah, and even though we come from New York, I mean, even comparing it to places like Connecticut and other parts of the US, I think we were really surprised overall that it was not as expensive as we were expecting.
Right.
Now, the next myth is that you can just drive to the beach or drive north to escape the heat. Now, again, if you saw our last video, you know that we were in Provence during a record-breaking heat wave, and we were there for 3 weeks, and we thought, well, maybe we'll just find a cooler spot to drive to. Maybe we'll drive to the Atlantic coast, which we spent some time at. Maybe we'll go north. And what we were really surprised to find is that the entire country was experiencing record-breaking heat. Now, I don't know if that's typical for heat waves in France or if that was something that was unique for this one. If you know, please tell us in the comments below. But really, pulling up the map of all of Europe for that time, almost everywhere was experiencing record-breaking heat, with the exception of if you went up into the Alps, then there were some places that were a little bit cooler. But we were just really surprised that the heat is harder to escape, and that's especially true in a country keeping in mind that most of France does not have air conditioning. And so we were fine. In the house that we stayed in, we were comfortable, but I think I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, I was too. Our what we're used to, I think, is, when we lived in California, the coast of California is much cooler than you go inland just 15 or 20 miles and it's incredibly hot. Same is true here in Portugal, that, we live in Nazaré, which is right on the coast, and, it stays relatively cool. But if you were to go inland just a little bit, it would be much, much warmer. And so in our heads, we were thinking maybe that's true in France as well. But it just, at least at that time, it just wasn't the case. Once the furnace was on, it was on everywhere, it seemed like.
The next myth is that you have to be fluent in French. Now, I would say that this is one of my biggest hesitations for road tripping around France. I took high school French. I know a few basic phrases. I'm definitely not conversational. And so we were really worried because we were going to be driving outside of a lot of tourist areas. We really thought that this was going to be an issue. I will say that it's good to know French if you're traveling through France, obviously. And if we moved here, we would absolutely learn French. But it wasn't as much of an obstacle as I expected it to be. Again, a few basic French phrases are going to be very helpful. But we were able to navigate the entire road trip pretty well without any real issues. What would you say?
Oh, I think that's right. I mean, there were a few times where, look, it would have been better had we known French, and it would have been easier to communicate with a person or people if we had known French. But we were able to get done what we needed to get done, and so it all worked out.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that we got lost and there was a Frenchman who helped us. He didn't speak any English, but we worked it out. And so if this is something that you're hesitating on, if it's holding you back from maybe taking a road trip like this, I would say that I think you can navigate it with just a few basic phrases.
Right, and Google Translate is helpful as well.
Now, the next myth is that France is unsafe. Now, this comes really from the Global Peace Index ranking. Portugal, for example, has ranked top 10 for many years. France ranks 74th, which is one of the lowest rankings for countries in Western Europe, certainly when you compare it to other countries around it. And just for context, the US is ranked 134th. And so we were really curious what that would feel like traveling around France. And I have to say that overall, we felt very, very safe wherever we went. We did have a handful, probably 2 or 3 instances where we thought, maybe this is nothing, but seems a little off. We'll give you one example. We were in Provence. We were out at dinner. We were out later than we expected to be. We were driving back. It was dark. They were back roads. very dark, no one around, 2-lane roads, if that. And we had a car that was following us. And I said to Matt, I think that there's a car following us. And I say things like this to Matt, and I expect him to say things like, no, you're imagining it. Or he's, doing this, explaining this situation. And instead, Matt said, I think you're right. I think someone is following us. And that's because we were on a straight road. The car was right on our tail, didn't pass us. Again, nobody else around. This was going on for quite a long time. So we came up to a roundabout, and Matt said, I'm going to drive all the way around the roundabout. I'm sure that he's just going to turn here. Everything is going to be fine. It's just a coincidence. And that car followed us all the way 360 around that roundabout. And we did have a moment of, okay, now what? Now they did eventually drive off. And again, that was probably nothing, but I think that we had a couple of instances like that. That is not the same as feeling unsafe. You can have situations like that anywhere, but overall, we felt very safe. What would you say?
We did feel very safe there. I mean, that was really an unusual circumstance. And again, whether it was a real thing or not, we don't know. We also had a situation in a parking garage in Toulouse where it felt sketchy, but again, it's hard to know what's sketchy and what's just sort of seems sketchy. We never lost anything. Nothing was stolen. We were never pickpocketed. It was very, very safe.
Yeah, and I will say that I think a lot of the crime that people talk about does take place in more touristed areas, things like pickpocketing. And I think that is just another reason to hop in a car and go see some of the places of France that are off the beaten path for tourists and beautiful places to see, less expensive, and just fewer of those issues.
Right.
And I think another myth that really probably comes from a lot of travel content about France is that there are really only a handful of beautiful villages worth seeing in France or the south of France, and this is absolutely not true. Just in Provence and the French Riviera alone, there are something like 900 villages, and then when you combine those areas with Occitanie and Nouvelle-Aquitaine, there's close to 10,000 villages, and many of these you've never heard of but are absolutely beautiful. I'll give you an example from our own travels. We were driving from Toulouse to down to Provence, and we decided just randomly to stop in a village for lunch. We'd never heard of it, didn't know anything about it, and not only did we have a great lunch, but the town was so beautiful. We spent an hour just wandering around, taking it in, and there are literally thousands of these villages all over the south of France. Another reason, I sound like a broken record, but another reason to hop in the car and start exploring.
Just a huge amount of villages that we sort of wished that we had visited, let alone all of the ones that we didn't even know about. So I think you could spend a lot of time here and never repeat visiting another village.
Yeah, I think we kind of got village blindness. I remember in our last video, we talked about seeing Gordes, which is a fantastically beautiful place. And by the time we got there, we had seen so much that we were like, it's nice.
It's all right.
And if you have ever been to Gordes, you're like, what? It's incredible. And it is, but there's just so much to see. That's the point, is that there's so much to see outside of sort of the regular travel content villages in France. So those are 7 myths that we believed before we took this trip. And we just want to say again, we've said it many times in this video, if you have ever dreamed of hopping in a car and taking a road trip through the south of France, definitely do it. We hope that we've inspired you. And if you want to know the one place we think is absolutely cannot miss, watch this next video. Thanks for watching.